Hello and welcome to The Switch. This is the series where we speak to inspirational people about big turning points in their lives and how we can all position ourselves for success. I'm G Footit and I'm lucky enough to quiz these people about the precise mix of skills, behaviours, traits and sheer grit that got them to the top of their game. In particular, I'm interested in those pivotal points in their lives that propel them to a new level and what we can all learn from it. Join us for this week's episode, Half Century Not Out. A big one for me personally, not because of my age, but as we discuss this very special guest with a strong personal sense of drive, determination and pride in making that bold step to strike out on his own and continue to grow a thriving business for over 50 years. Our guest will be talking about his own journey from a promising city finance career to taking a bold step and following an entrepreneurial endeavour very close to his heart. But importantly, The Switch is also about you, our listeners. Are you content with your life, your career? Are you considering making a switch of your own? Are you maybe looking for a new direction or the motivation to take a crucial step up? Whatever your situation, I hope you'll take inspiration from this show. And as the series continues, we'd love to take your questions for our future guests. To introduce myself, I work at the UK's largest provider of face-to-face financial advice, St James's Place, and I'm involved in our academy, which has so far trained over 1,300 people to become financial advisors. These are people from all walks of life who decided to make a career switch of their own. To inspire others to do the same, we're talking to extraordinary people across entertainment, sport, psychology, and in this episode, a business owner who brought together a lifelong personal passion and niche business opportunity with a household name in the world of cricket. Someone very dear to me. Today, I'm joined by Dilip Jajodia, my dad. Dilip is owner of Morant Group Limited, an early pioneer in mail order retail, and British Cricket Balls Limited, makers of the famous Duke's cricket ball, used in test match cricket. Born and brought up in Mewar, Rajasthan, India, Dilip moved to the UK and pursued studies in chartered accounting and finance. Having attended Bishop's Cotton Boys School in Bangalore, the Eton of the East, he had received a good education and was set up well for his chosen professional path. On graduating, he eventually took up a role in insurance with the Commercial Union, working in the city. He worked his way up the ladder with roles in chartered insurance as a life inspector and a pension fund management. He was headhunted to go and run a private pension fund with the London Rubber Company, and he was also mentored by the chairman of Charles Stanley. Following almost a decade in finance roles, he and his business partner at the time saw an opportunity they couldn't pass up to step away from their corporate career trajectories and set up and run something of their own, Morant Sports, in 1973, offering mail-order sports goods to clubs around the UK. Having played club cricket in both India and England, Dilip has been passionate about cricket his entire life. In 1987, he acquired British Cricket Balls Limited, makers of the Duke's ball, one of the oldest and most highly regarded balls used in professional cricket matches. With his personal commitment to excellence, they continue to produce Duke's cricket balls in traditional methods and along with other sporting goods serve an always full order book to a global customer base. Now in his 8th decade, Dilip has no plans to retire. Dilip, Dad, welcome and thank you so much for taking time to join us on The Switch.
Thank you for inviting me.
Unlike any of our other guests, we are in fact related. And so some of the things we will talk about I already know, of course. But there are some things that I haven't grilled you about. And many things I think will resonate with our audience, particularly insight around your significant professional direction change. But before we get into the detail, could you first give us a little backstory about yourself? Where are you based? Where do you currently call home?
Well, I'm based in East London, live in Essex on the fringe of London. And the company now has 2 premises, one in South Woodford and one in Walthamstow.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in India in Bangalore, where I went to school. You've mentioned it earlier on, to Bishop Cotton's. And I came here straight from school. So really my entire adult life has been spent here in England. And it was quite challenging when I first came here, but I just had to get on with it.
And what made you come to the UK?
Well, I always wanted to come to the UK because I wanted to be a trained chartered accountant. And the perception was that the best recognised degree in accountancy or the qualification was in England. And so I headed for England the first opportunity I could straight from school.
What was your upbringing like in Rajasthan?
Well, I spent most of my time actually in Bangalore because I went to boarding school. So I more or less resonate to Bangalore. My parents were business people. My father travelled all the time. So being in boarding school was probably a sensible way to put me away without causing difficulties for them while they were travelling. The upbringing in Bangalore particularly was very nice. Nice place, climate quite good. As you know, it's probably now recognised as the IT capital of the world. Great mathematical brains coming out of that part of India, and very sporty as well. The cricket academy is based in Bangalore, so it goes back in history, and so that was a really nice place to come to be brought up.
And where you first got interested in cricket?
Indeed, in school, like all aspiring cricketers, wanted to play at the highest level and so on. But I had a very tragic accident of being hit in the mouth in the big match between the old boys and the school, and that kind of put pay to that ambition. But I still had the desire, so I haven't ended up being a top player, but I'm actually still in the business.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned your early ambition to be qualified an accountant. Where did that come from?
My father was, as I said, a very successful businessman, and interestingly enough, he had periods of great success and huge amounts of money, and some periods of depths of despair, and it was up and down all the time. So even as a youngster, I perceived that perhaps if I'd qualified as a chartered accountant, I may well be able to get a grip of the family finances and stop the ups and downs and try and get a level playing field. But that was the main motivation. But also a desire, really, to be independent.
So what profession was your father in?
My father was just a businessman, a real entrepreneur, that describes him perfectly. Huge number of different things in his life. Somebody who made things happen, And as I say, he had lots of ups and downs, so he's able to cope. So he had great success and then great downs where it cost him a lot of money, but he still recovered and came back again.
And when you did come to the UK, did you come with any family members or struck out on your own?
In the early days, I was on my own and had some friends, of course, who we had in India, and they put me up. And I, literally from day one, used to go down to the youth employment office and sit outside the door and keep saying I wanted a job. And after about a month, they found me a job in the building working for the Borough Treasurer's Department in Hornsey.
And I remember a story you told me about how cold you found it here.
Yes, of course. I arrived in 62, the autumn of 62, and of course that winter 62-63 was one of the coldest. I remember it snowed on Boxing Day, and there were still signs of it in April, so it was pretty chilly.
A bit of a shock to the system from Bangalore.
Yeah, absolutely.
So through your roles working in finance and insurance, you were eventually finding success. Could you see a future in that corporate world at the time?
Yes, I had, very good success and great opportunities. And you mentioned that I ended up running the pension fund for the London Rubber Company, LRC International as they were known. And it's a big group. It had 30-odd different subsidiaries. And when I finished reorganizing the pension arrangements, they offered me a job of control of European operations, which was very exciting. But it would have meant traveling even more than I was traveling already. And frankly, I couldn't see the rewards for that effort because of the corporate structure. So that's when I had to make a decision as to whether I carried on and went up in that line or whether I went off and did my own thing. And that was a major, major decision, because literally from having a safe and secure job, I was without anything the following day.
Wow. It feels like a cliff edge, and it did feel like that to you.
Oh, yes. I mean, it was a huge risk.
So before we go into that moment, when you were in the corporate world and you had a very successful career there, were you looking at long-term goals before you made that big decision to make the move? Were you thinking, yep, I could go up one of these paths?
Yeah, I mean, if I'd stayed as I was in that company, I'm sure I would have gone further up in the ladder there. And it would have been not in finance necessarily, it would have been in general management of the business. A very diverse business. Yes, I could have stayed there and I would have done well, I'm sure.
And you made the first switch, I suppose, from your original idea of accounting into the insurance and pensions world. Yeah. How did that come about? Because
when I looked into becoming a chartered accountant, I discovered that they paid £10 a week. In fact, a little bit prior to that, your father had to pay them to give you a job. So, it was big progress when they decided to give youngsters 10 quid a week. And, I couldn't work it out. I mean, the underground fare was £2.50. The rent for a single bedsit was £5, so it didn't leave a lot of change. So asking around, people said, well, if that's no good, why don't you go into insurance? Because you can get a job where they pay you a reasonable salary and give you time off to go to college and get a professional qualification. So that sounded like a good idea to me. And that's when I joined the commercial union.
Amazing. And what kind of skills were you learning there? And you did progress up the ladder quite quickly. What do you think were the traits that enabled that for you? Essentially,
obviously, I was keen to get a professional qualification. So I went to the City of London College. I was extremely hardworking. I never missed class. Was really keen to qualify as soon as possible. And then in the job, I fairly quickly got appointed to becoming a life inspector. And what was really good was the way it worked. In the city branch, you had about 12 general inspectors, and I was a life inspector who looked after those 12 inspectors in terms of life and pensions business. So I didn't have to go looking for leads, but I had lots of leads to follow up through these guys. So then my job was to really work extremely hard to make it happen for them because, their earnings depended on it. And, of course, I benefited. So I think I did quite well with that. I got on with them. They were all sportsmen. They all played cricket and all that sort of thing. So I was well part of the team, and that was recognized and made rapid progress. And I got to a point, I seemed to be going inclined towards pensions in that because they were big, it's a big deal. If you got a lead, which was a company wanting to put in a pension fund, the premium income was huge compared to somebody individually wanting a life policy. So I was going down that route. And then I was headhunted to go to London Rubber Company because they'd heard about me somewhere along the line. I couldn't really pin it down. And the task was to coordinate all their pension funds into their own self-administered pension fund. And the opportunity was there not only to do the technical work on running the pension fund, but also to invest the money. And I was very lucky that the company's chairman was also the owner of Charles Stanley before it became a public company, Sir Edward Howard. And he was terrific. And I got literally, training in Charles Stanley to manage money and also in the same run the pension fund. So it was a big challenge, and I really enjoyed it because it was full on.
And what was the role you were doing directly before you decided to start your own business?
Well, I was, in that company as the manager. I was in the HR department and I was in charge of pensions, basically. That was it. It was then a European operation. So that was achieved quite quickly.
Amazing. And now you have your own business. You've been running your own operation for half a century. Tell us about the history of the company and also the types of things that you get engaged with day to day.
Some of it's quite tedious. I think when you own a business, I often say that, I do the sweeping up and the washing up as well, and you really have to. Starting the business from scratch was an amazing experience, very hair-raising. You just wonder from time to time, am I doing the right thing? But you just got to keep your head down and keep going. I remember the first mail-out was an A4 sheet of paper with a list of 5 cricket balls that I was importing. And just didn't know what to expect and got some orders back. Quite surprised, really. Because there was a demand for, there was always the economic, it's even today, they want cheaper and cheaper product. That got me going. And then, of course, gradually we started selling other things and built up a portfolio of sports as well. So we're doing cricket, hockey, rugby. And again, cricket was always the main focus because I was keen on it anyway. And eventually I got the opportunity I was appointed a director of British Cricket Balls because they'd heard about my marketing skills and so on. And I was a director there, and they decided to sell the company and gave me first refusal. And that was a really enormous challenge to find the resources to buy the company. And I'm delighted I did, because that really was the thing I wanted to do.
Amazing. And how satisfied are you in terms of the business and where you've got it to today?
Well, it's taken a very long time. I mean, as you pointed out, it's 50. I've been in business for over 50 years now. But the thing about products particularly is that you can't get instant recognition, especially when it's a difficult product. Big companies with big budgets can buy the publicity, they can advertise on television, they do all sorts of things. This is a product which You're constantly in the limelight in a very focused way. And if the product is right, then the right word gets around. And then the business keeps coming to you. And sadly for me, this momentum is coming right now, which is really the end of my time. And as you know, your brother is in the business working with me. And he's going to inherit a business at that very crucial stage of moving up. The only thing that restrains us is really the capacity to manage what we have to manage. It's a very skilled and difficult business.
Yeah.
So, that's, you have to do everything.
Absolutely. So we've called this episode Half Century Not Out, not only for a cheap cricket pun, but also to acknowledge the enduring success and testament to your decision to set up all those years ago. So we're going to delve into the switch moment a little bit more. So can you tell us about the big switch moment when you decided to strike out on your own? You've mentioned this business partner. Like, how did it all come about?
Well, when we worked for London Rubber Company, they had a very antiquated management structure. Like, you used to have dining rooms for different grades of staff. So, managers and supervisors and all that stuff. So as being part of the top management team, I had the privilege of being in the manager's dining room at lunch. And the man who was in charge of IT, a chap called Eric Munt, we used to sit together and over lunch and talking about various things. And again, we had sport in common. And conversation developed where we were talking about, perhaps getting away from the corporate lifestyle and doing something exciting. I didn't know what was involved at the time. So he was 10 years older than me, and he said it was his last chance to do something. And so just kept on discussing things and eventually got to a point when we said, right, we're going to do it. So really with no plan exactly what to do, but just the principle of leaving and then looking at doing something. But in fairness to that company, they were very good, because when we actually announced that we were leaving, it was obviously a bit of a blow because there were two leading managers, especially him. I mean, in those days, the computer filled a whole room, so in the early days of computing. And they were extremely helpful. I was appointed a non-executive director of the pensions company and given a year's contract, very generous terms, with just 6 board meetings to attend or be available on the phone. And that was really a helpful gesture. And they did the same with him, So we both had some income coming in. And so we then sort of finished and went off and started having meetings about what to do. And again, as I said, sport we had in common. So we said mail order in sport doesn't exist, so we should give that a go. And then, of course, cricket and football were the two interests. I'm cricket, he was football. So I then went off to India and researched the supply side. He was still doing some consultancy on the admin side and computerization. So I told you I sent out the sheet of paper, which orders started coming in. So then there was all the mechanics of, the importing of it and so on, which he covered. And surprisingly, we started getting a little bit of momentum. But then it got to a point where the business was established, but not big enough, really, to pay 2 people. So one had to make a very crucial decision. And we did it quite well. There was no fallout, an acceptance. In the meantime, he developed other contacts, because he's a very clever guy and he's very good at his job. So he got offers to go in and do consultancy in computing. So we mutually agreed that he'd move on and stay in that area, because he was not a natural marketeer in sport. He enjoyed sport, but he didn't have the normal ability to chat people up and that sort of thing. So we split in a very amicable way, and then I carried on. And I'm pleased to say, I must give credit that I used to bank with Midland Bank, which is now HSBC, and I went to see the manager and said, I was leaving, and he asked me if I'd lost my senses. And then he said, well, what do you want from me? And I said, well, I'd like an overdraft facility. So he said, well, what do you want? So I said, I'd like a £10,000 overdraft. It doesn't sound a lot now, but £10,000 is quite a lot of money in those days. So he said, well, what guarantees have you got? I said, well, I haven't got anything. I haven't started yet. So because he was used to dealing with me in the millions because of the pension fund, I guess, he said, all right, I'll give you the overdraft. So that's how I got started, literally with minus 10,000. And then as time went on, they've always been there to support whatever I decided to do. And I, by the way, it's quite interesting. I got invited by HSBC to lunch the other day up in the tower in Canary Wharf. A special lunch for me because I'd done 50 years as a customer.
Oh, wow.
Which is unusual. And the top director there said, you've got a very interesting file. You see, those things do help because even though I kept having to borrow money, I was never borrowing money that I couldn't handle.
Yeah.
And I think I have a unique record, which they told me about at this lunch, that I've never, ever broken the agreements, never had to ring me and say, you've overdrawn or you're not paying your money back as agreed. So it's those small things that make the success, because then you gain a reputation. If you've got a problem, you ring them up, you get an answer. So that's, two ways. So I do give them a lot of credit for the support.
So other than the financial challenges, what else did you have to overcome? Was there any doubt in self-belief, motivation?
Yeah, it was extremely hard work. I can remember in the early days, I used to physically fill a big bag with parcels and walk up the road like Santa Claus, up to the post office. And then also fill envelopes with, mail order catalogs and put them on my back and walk up the road to the post office. So, those were the days where you just literally had to do everything. And, packing the parcels, doing the accounts, all that sort of stuff. And making buying decisions and trying to drum up customers.
So it is a very international business in terms of your supply chain. You've made a success of it. What would you say you've learnt along the way, or what transferable skills did you use from your previous career?
I think you've got to be straight, be absolutely honest with everybody and with yourself, and just stay focused on what you want to achieve. Because if you do that, then things fall into place. And I come across people who don't do that. And I just wonder why did they do this? Because you get found out. You've got to be dedicated. It comes through because every time you deal with people and you are straight and you do a really good job and you're dedicated in the product, you don't have to sell it. It just comes out, I think. And so, the position that I'm in world cricket now, dealing with all the chief executives around the world and so on, that's just purely because of, again, getting used to dealing with these people, giving them a track record to think about. So, and now, we're getting a lot of business from the United States. Just never dreamt that they'd be playing enough cricket in America. But that's going to grow very fast. And it's just word of mouth recommendations.
Yeah. You do a good job, you get referrals.
Exactly. That is so key. Going back to my early days in finance, certainly those referrals were not just the general inspectors who refer them to me, but when we did a job jointly for a customer, we used to get the referrals. And because, being in that financial service, I used to be really concerned about the general inspectors. You had to go out there and craft for the leads. That's not easy. And your business is to do with people going out and finding people. And you've got to have a huge amount of resilience to do that. And even more important, that if you do it properly. Absolutely.
Your reputation precedes you.
Exactly.
So you made a huge jump, took a big risk. You started out minus 10,000. At what point did you feel confident that you had made the right decision?
Well, when I bought British cricket balls, I had to have the confidence to literally raise every bit of money I could to buy that company with no guarantee that it would be a success. But I had to have confidence in myself that I could take a big brand and then make it grow again, because it was right down in the depths of despair, frankly. The shareholders had run it into the ground. They were not supporting it. So that was a big moment. And it's taken me a very long time, by the way, to get up here. But as I explained earlier, you've got to prove the product.
Absolutely. Now, we've got some props on the table here. I know this is an audio podcast, but in 2023, you were interviewed and appeared in the 160th edition of Wisden Cricketers Almanack, often referred to as the Cricketers' Bible. How did that come about, and how did you feel being part of such a prestigious publication?
Well, I mean, it's a huge honour because there's not many non-first-class cricketers in there. So it's quite interesting. Well, basically, one of the journalists, I think, who decided he'd known about me in the story and came and interviewed me and discovered a few things, which is highlighted in that article, is that I've been very lucky as well. You know, they say you make your own luck. But one of the key things that happened to me was that when I was talked about importing cricket balls, you know, with the desire to improve it, one of the problems was the superficial polish on the cricket balls. And what I was getting from abroad was just not good enough. So I was constantly looking for something, you know, to make it better. I was not technical, so I was just thrashing around, really. And one day I saw a little ad in the Cricketer magazine saying, Ply and Dior, repolish all cricket balls, £20, it'll do 200 balls, a kit. So it caught my eye. I thought I got nothing to lose, so I ordered one. And it arrived, 3 little cans of liquid and a piece of wood with 6 nails and a paintbrush and some instructions. So I did all that and gave the balls to my own club to play with, and they said, oh, these are so much better. So I'd stumbled on something which was quite unique. So I then started, I told them, don't polish the balls over there. When they came in, we started doing it here. And having more and more and more success. And I was buying bigger and bigger quantity. I wasn't buying just these little cans. I was buying them in gallon drums. And so one day I decided to go and meet these people who were making this stuff because it was helping my business. So I went down to, it was somewhere in Derbyshire. Sadly, I didn't have any exact details because this guy was wanting details to go and interview these people. Anyway, I got to this place, industrial unit in Derbyshire, and rang the door. It was actually just a metal bashing factory. And this chap came to the door and introduced himself as Barry. And I said, oh, do you make this? He said, no, I don't. I've got this business. But a friend of the family is in the back of the factory. We've given him some space, and he makes this stuff. Come and meet him. So he took me around the back, and there was this amazing-looking man. He was very, very elderly, and there was something about him. There was an aura about him. And we said hello. I said, thank you so much for your product. And he said, oh, thank you so much for having faith in it, and so on. So we got on really well. And in the conversation, it transpired that he'd survived Auschwitz. And when he was a very young man in Germany, he had the expertise in leather preservation, and he worked on all the manuscripts and the government bonded books and that sort of thing. And he'd come over as a refugee. And incredible story. Barry was a cricketer, and he was chatting to him and said, the problem is these balls are useless after we played with them. Is there anything you could do with your expertise? So he said, I'll go and think about it. So he came up with this formula. And they then said, let's try and market it for clubs to repolish their used balls. So Apply and Endure became Ply and Endure. Amazing, all this stuff. And so he started doing it. And of course, it was very small scale. But I was starting to buy it in large scale. So that was it. There he was, an Auschwitz survivor with the expertise who I met and learnt about this polish and was buying it. So anyway, I went away, and sometime later I got a call from Barry, and he said, I've got some sad news, of course. He said, Walter's very old gentleman, and he's passed away, sadly. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? He said, don't worry. I have a brown envelope, which he asked me to keep in my safe and to send it to you in the event of my passing. So I've got the envelope for you. And needless to say, in the envelope was the formula for this polish. So I said, do I need to pay you? And he said, no, there's nothing to pay. He's very happy that you supported his product, and he's left you the formula.
That's amazing.
So that was the key, because then I was able to carry on, make it to this day. And then I used my common sense and inquisitiveness to see how I could develop that basic formula.
And from what you were saying before with your relationship with the bank, with this person You seem to be very loyal to all of the people that you work with, and you've not only been left the formula for the ball polish in somebody's will, you've been left a whole great big machine that makes cricket pads in someone else's will.
Yes, that's another amazing story, really. This pad machine, unique pads, which a lot of leading players around the world have worn. It was an idea that started with the physiotherapist from Surrey County Cricket Club, who mentioned to a mate of his who he met in the pub, who happened to be a man who ran an engineering company, that the players wanted a lightweight pad. And so this guy went away and worked on this and then came up with this product. So the physiotherapist from Surrey introduced it to the Surrey players. And one of those players was Mickey Stewart, was Alex Stewart's dad. And he used to be a Slazenger sponsored player. So, of course, they were given first refusal. And I, as a retailer, doing mail order, was the first customer because I loved it. I'd looked at it and said, wow, we'll promote it. And so I was selling these Slazenger pads. And again, it's quite interesting that Slazenger, being a big worldwide company at the time, the Australian Slazenger company ordered 1,000 pairs of these pads. They sent these pads to Australia, and what they hadn't done is enough testing because of the climatic difference in temperatures and so on. The straps were pulling through and the pads, it was a complete disaster. So they just literally cancelled the whole project. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm selling these quite well. And they said, well, there's no volume, we can't do it. So I had no idea who was making it. I just thought it was Slazenger. So anyway, I then, being inquisitive, I was very ambitious in looking around. I went to Germany to an industrial exhibition, just looking for ideas. And I'm walking along, and suddenly, on a stand, was these pads in red on the wall. So I went in there. The guy spoke no English, and I spoke no German. So we exchanged communication, and I said, that one. And he gave me the name of the company that did that in England. And he said, we make the material, but these people in England make the pads. So then I knew who made the pads. So when I came back, I contacted them. It was a company called Lewis Engineering, Lewis in Sussex. And met the guy and had conversations, told him that I thought, I love the product and I can help you make it better and all that sort of thing. And I've got a marketing ability. So to cut a long story short, did all that and started selling them. And obviously the Morant, my company name, went on them. I signed Sunil Gavaskar, the world-famous Indian cricketer, and that got huge amount of publicity because they're very different-looking pads. And then other players. And, that's been going really well for a long time. So again, after a while, and they were supplying them, Lewis Engineering. I got a phone call from his right-hand man saying the old boy's passed away. So I said, oh, my goodness, this is bad luck again. If I had somebody else pass away. He said, don't worry. He said, he's left you the machine. I just couldn't believe my luck. And this is a massive, massive moulding, very unique moulding machine. I think it was estimated that the actual mould had cost £40,000 about 30, 40 years ago. So that's a very, very expensive thing. So, of course, we still make the pad, and the latest superstar in India is using them. And again, an inherited product and really fantastic.
And testament, again, to that working relationship, long-term relationship, pay off over the long term.
Absolutely. Key, you must be as much as possible loyal and true to the people who if you really believe in it, then you've got to let them know. That's the key.
Absolutely. I read a recent article where they'd published a list of endangered crafts in the UK and highlighted an initiative to have established with a charity, Heritage Crafts. Could you tell us about how you came to be involved with them and what work you might be doing together?
The King is the patron, and the guy, Jay, the fellow who does the repair shop.
I love the repair shop.
He's involved. He's chairman of one of the committees. The King is apparently very anxious that all these kind of crafts that are disappearing should be saved. So they're on a mission, and obviously cricket balls is one of the mentioned. Now, we're not totally extinct because we do quite a lot of work here and subcontract the real skills abroad. So anyway, they said they'd like to come and meet me, and so they turned up with a camera and so on and interviewed me and felt that it'll be quite useful to make an effort. And So I'm in that process. I think Jay is coming to visit me in about a couple of weeks' time. There's a woman, Charlotte, who's like she's an author and she's a link person in all of this that's going on. And there was this article in the newspaper, and then I was interviewed on ITV News, and I think we've got about 12 people who've expressed an interest.
Wow.
To train as cricket ball.
Fantastic.
So we're also dealing with Dunhill, which happens to be located in Walthamstow, which is quite amazing, and to cooperate with them because we're all looking for people who want to use their hands. So I don't know. I mean, I'd like to be optimistic, but it's tough work, and this is why it's kind of gone obsolete because, sitting down and stitching a cricket ball for 8 hours is not easy. So anyway, it's, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I mean, you give it a go.
See where it takes you.
Yeah.
So back to your experience of being your own boss. You've been your own boss for a long time now. What skills do you call on most in your day-to-day life still today?
Well, I mean, it's multifaceted, isn't it? You can't say, I've just got this skill. You're dealing with different facets. I mean, certainly, the dealing with people, staffing, that's a huge challenge because people are so different. Then you've got all the regulations and, all that stuff that you're going to deal with. Then there's the finance side of it. There's marketing. So, I mean, one of the reasons I've stuck to all of this is that everything is a challenge, and I'm one of these people who just likes challenges. I'm a bit of a lunatic, really. I don't know. I'm motivated by it. So I just, every time, if I get sort of knocked down, I get myself up and go again. That's probably very useful for your potential trainees. They've got to really stick to it. Don't weaken. You've got to really be determined. Have
your why very clear. Why are you doing this? Stick to the path.
Yeah.
And resilience is one of the traits that we question people on actually when they join, because I think it's really important. Like you said at the beginning, building up client base, getting referrals, it takes time. So you need to be resilient.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you feel are the most common hurdles for people looking to overcome, or, when they're taking a big change in direction? What do you think they need to consider for themselves?
Well, you just said it, didn't you? In terms of patience, I think is the word, because it's not going to happen overnight. Reputations take a long time to come to fruition. But the speed of that depends on how active and how successful you are and how much drive you've got. That's the key to it. So I would suggest that, they've got to really make up their minds that this is what they want to do. They enjoy doing it. They enjoy seeing the pleasure in the eyes of the customer. It's an advisory business. You're advising somebody to invest. And if that comes off, that's the pleasure. I mean, going back to my business, for example, now, all the things I've said, if I gain a league or an association in Melbourne, or I've just got an inquiry from Chicago, diverse areas of the world, and if I actually get that order, I can't describe the pleasure that gives you. That's what it's about. And so similarly, like in the early days, if I had gone out with one of the inspectors and we got a pension scheme, the kick that one got out of that was unbelievable. Premium income of £100,000 a year, fantastic. It used to meet my targets in March, which was incredible. So they only set a bigger target the next year, But that was what it was, the drive, to be somebody who's recognized as succeeding.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the difference. So you started your career as an employee. You've been your own boss for a long time. What's the difference in mindset? You mentioned at the beginning, talking about making sure you've got the employees, the staff, etc. Is there anything else? What's really different in the mindset?
The mindset is, well, in my case, really, I was the first member of my family, our family, should I say, who worked for somebody else when I came over here. Otherwise, they all just went into the family business. And when I actually worked for somebody else, my determination was to become self-employed. So that was a huge driving force. I wanted to do my own thing. And it's very difficult, actually, to describe. I've been now self-employed for over 50 years. And even though I had a really good job, you still, you wake up in the morning, and in theory, yes, you've got a good job, but somebody could terminate that. Now, the only way my job as a self-employed person could be terminated is my failure. There's a big difference in your mindset. You look at that and you think, And let's face it, in the corporate world, I've witnessed quite a few people in those organizations who suddenly disappear for no apparent reason, but they don't fit in or they don't perform or whatever, and they've gone. Whereas if you're your own boss, the fear of failure keeps you going. And if you've got the determination, you'll succeed and you'll still be around.
Fantastic. When you reflect on the choices you've made throughout your life now, would you have done anything differently?
Well, I mean, in the early days when it was quite tough, I think you question whether you're doing the right thing. Have you done the right thing? But again, once you're into it, there is a fear factor and a fear of failing factor that gets a grip. And if you've got that in your nature, you don't allow it to get over you. Because, we hear a lot about mental health issues and so on. That's pressure. When people succumb to pressure, they call it a mental health problem. The mental health is your strong mind that says, I'm not going to let this get to me. And you can solve it. I'm not making light of it. It's been horrendous at times. One of the things that is not much publicized is that I linked up with people in Australia and the company was floated on the Melbourne stock market. And that was a horrendous, tough time to do all that negotiating. And then it was a failure because there was failure in the way those people managed it, and also there was a financial crisis and so on, and they'd overborrowed and so on. And again, I luckily bought my business back. And again, I was able to do it because I had confidence in it, and dear old bankers backed me. You see, those are the sort of things which it's now a distant memory, but you're asking me the question of what you had done. That was the wrong decision at the time, but luckily I got out of it.
Is there ever an ideal time to make a significant change in your life? How old were you that first pivot into self-employment?
27.
Is there ever an ideal time?
Not really. I think if it's in your genes and if it's in your mind, and I think experience is a very important thing. I think you can be fit, and you can be young, and you can be ambitious, but a little bit of experience is not a bad thing, because the experience teaches you how to cope with the failure. Because there will be some pressures of failure, and like, say, for instance, if I lose a league, somebody else comes along and takes the business away, I have to have the mental strength to say, I didn't lose that because I lost it. I've lost it for various reasons, but it wasn't my incompetence or my failure of performance. And that's important, because then you go to the next one without letting it get you down. That's what we talk about, mental strength.
So what are some ways that our listeners could build their skills and their confidence to make a similar switch or progression in their career? What advice would you give them?
Well, if you really do want to change because you're not entirely happy with what you're doing, or you want to be happier going somewhere else, think very hard and with a lot of detail in your mind as to what you want to do. Check that you've got resources, financial certainly. Risk-taking is part of it. You can't ignore it. But you've got to make sure you've got some finance. Like I said, I got a non-executive director with a salary. That was very helpful. So you've got to have that sort of thing. But then you've got to say, what happens, this goes wrong, but not get cowed by it, but just keep thinking about it, because once you're in there, you're like like a gerbil in a cage. You'll be running, you can't stop. You just got to keep going. And if you like what you're doing, if you want to be a financial advisor or whatever, or a doctor, I watch this program on surgeons, and I look at those guys operating on somebody's brain, or their heart. I saw a heart operation, which, I've been through. Quite fascinating, really, what they get up to. And there's no doubt that if you do that and you're successful, you'll carry on,
And how much has your absolute passion for cricket, do you think, been a key part of your success?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have been a cricketer, an international cricketer. That's what I wanted to be. But that was not to be. But I guess it gives you a feeling for... It's interesting, actually, because with cricket, I've travelled, as you know, all around the world. I've met, and cricket actually, because it's a worldwide game, you meet people from Europeans, Asians, Africans, West Indians, and so on. And with the huge diverse people, and there is something common among them. You can't put your finger on it, and that's cricket. It just there's something. When you meet somebody to do with cricket, you kind of get on, you know. Very rarely do I come across somebody in cricket who I think, you know, the genes are not matching here. And so that's another reason, you know, I have a sort of an affinity with it. And I hope that people find the same when they meet me, you know, that the passion comes through. And again, it's all these things we've been discussing. In any walk of life, you really do need passion and desire and drive in order to succeed.
Absolutely. And before we close the show, let us know, what have you got going on right now? What's on the horizon for you?
Well, on the horizon is hopefully handing over to my son, who's very involved in the business, as you know, who's doing an excellent job. And I'm confident that he will take up the reins and carry it on. You know, he seems to be getting on with the customers extremely well. And that in itself is a huge satisfaction for me, that this business will carry on. I've had offers of people wanting to buy the business, you know, and it's not a business that can fit into corporate culture. It's not a business that will have huge success because there's money being thrown at it. It'll only carry on being successful if whoever runs it after me has the same kind of guiding principles of wanting to keep it going. And it's a family business. You know, it used to be Duke and Son when it started in 1760, and now it's Dilip and Son in this modern era, but still the old-fashioned way of doing things.
And I like that it's been part of my life, obviously, growing up. My first job was on a Saturday, picking up the phone. My sister, Nina, works there. Her two eldest children have both worked there. So it's definitely a family affair.
Yeah, I mean, it was great when we had all three generations in the building not so long ago. And that, you see, that's the satisfaction. You can't put a price on it, you know. Fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your insights today and joining us on The Switch.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I hope that it's useful to somebody if they're looking for inspiration to get some strength from it. Thank you, Geets.
Thank you. In this episode, we've been discussing the entrepreneurial spirit, passion, pride and commitment to excellence in anything you choose to do when facing a direction change. If you enjoyed listening, please make sure to check out our other episodes, like, review and share. Thank you for listening.